All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I forgot to turn off the counter from Friday, but that's okay because I made a button for that. A roof. How are we doing today, Cameroon?
I'm okay. This was a weekend.
Yes, it was.
Sometimes everybody at home gets sick except for you, and that's some next level shit when you're doing the single parent thing. When you're the only one who's not sick. But plus side, I'm not sick. Despite being exhausted, I feel great.
I'll knock on the desk for you there. You are welcome. All right.
I don't think it was superstition. I think it was judicious use of hand washing and disinfectant.
Yeah, but we're right-wing nut jobs. We don't believe in washing our hands, remember? Haven't you been watching CNN? Dr. Fauci
right.
never lies.
Yeah, we're the anti-science party. That's us. All because we think boys have penises.
Yes.
Hey, speaking of science.
Yes. Well, so, funny story, guys. This morning's topic, we're talking about UFOs. And there's a few reasons we're talking about UFOs. I'll hit that in just a second. When I told Cameron this morning that we were talking about UFOs, I could definitely hear a little skepticism in his voice, like, what, why? Why?
I mean, look, don't get it twisted. I'm a big damn nerd. Please, let's talk about, ufology. See, that's a word. Ufology.
Yes, it is. And ufology and cryptozoology are two things that fascinate me. If for no other reason, the fantasy, the science fiction lore of it. But what we're talking about this morning is not science fiction. What we will be talking about this morning, and Cameron asked, why are we talking about this morning? So before I get into the stuff that I really want to talk about, there's a couple of little things that make this current and topical. One is just a few days ago, we had this report. Here's a copy of it. Here's a version of it from the International Business Times. Senator Rubio confirms UFO sightings on military bases. Pentagon UFO report could be delayed. So I've been digging into this, and I read I read a bunch of stuff this morning that might have been a waste of time, tangentially to what I was really looking for. But there is a deadline right now that the Pentagon has to produce this report of basically declassified information on UFO sightings, and the deadline is June 1st. I don't remember where I saw it or if I heard it from somebody or what, but I couldn't find what I was looking for exactly. But as I understand it, and I'm going to keep looking into this so I can get it nailed down, but as I understand it, that has to do with something from the Trump administration, some cabinet policy or some executive order that created this deadline. Hey, by June 1st, the Pentagon has to declassify this, that, and the other thing, which includes a bunch of reporting on UFO sightings. So let me just get the improbability or the skepticism on the UFO stuff out of the way. So one of the if you remember a week or two ago, we did a little housekeeping at the end of an episode, and Cameron and I asked you guys what kind of stuff you want to hear us talking about on this show. And a lot of it was technology, current science. We mentioned longevity, space elevators, space exploration, and of course, somewhere in all of that fantastic stuff is the ufology. That's worth talking about. It's interesting. Tim Pool and a few of the other big internet personalities have started talking about it a little bit. For one, it's going to be a slow news year with Biden in office because the enemy is actively suppressing information relating to, and to be clear, when I say the enemy is actively suppressing information, the Biden administration has forbidden access to the press to the border crisis stuff, to border patrols, to any of that, right? To ice. They're stonewalling and freezing out the press on the whole border crisis because Joe doesn't want to admit that he's 700% worse at this than Donald Trump is. Now, that means we're going to have to fill the time with some other stuff here and there. Ufology I find very interesting. So let's get to the skeptic piece. We don't even have to answer the question of extraterrestrials. Now, of course, there is an answer to the question of extraterrestrials, and that answer is yes. Right? Between Fermi's paradox and the Drake equation, which both basically use a lot of complex math to say because the universe is infinitely large, there's an infinite chance that intelligent life exists on another planet. So basically the math guarantees that there are aliens. Now, what the math cannot guarantee, and part of where the math falls down on this is that the universe is it is infinite in size and scope. It is not infinitely old. So we have infinite chances, but we don't have that over an infinite time period as far as we understand it. So it could easily be that life has developed, in a parallel way on other planets, and there are other planets where life has reached the same level of technology that we have, which does not include faster than light travel, which makes visiting other planets improbable at best right now. So the likelihood that there is extraterrestrial intelligent life, nearly 100%. The likelihood that we have been visited by that extraterrestrial life is much closer to zero. That does not mean that it's impossible that aliens have visited this planet. However, in the absence of aliens, we can move forward on ufology. We don't need aliens to have UFOs, because we have foreign governments and we have nerds. There are nerds out there right now that are building shit that the government cannot imagine. And that's not hard to do because the government is slow and dumb. So when you talk about, the government does have organizations whose job it is, the government does have organizations whose jobs it is, wow, that's, okay, moving forward, like the Advanced Aerospace Threat Detection Unit. And what they do is they deal with UFOs being reported by service members, right? And not just service members, but, there are a lot of UFO reports that have been made by astronauts and fighter pilots, even commercial pilots, because they're up there and they're looking around at the sky in particular. They see shit and they talk about it. And a lot of that talking about gets shut down and gets classified. Those organizations talk about what they call the 5 observables. Those are instantaneous acceleration, positive lift or anti-gravity-like behavior, low observability, hypersonic velocity, and transmedium travel. Transmedium travel means, so you think of a hovercraft, for example, goes over the land, and then when it comes to the water, it just keeps going because it's hovering above, right? So most, as I'm sure you're aware, most vehicles are not James Bond's car. You don't just drive off the pier and suddenly your car is also a submarine. When you start seeing stuff like that in an unidentified flying object, or what is now more officially referred to as a UAP, I think, unidentified aerial phenomenon. When you start seeing things like transmedia travel, that raises questions, especially when that transmedia travel, rather than being from traveling over the land to over the water like a hovercraft, you're talking about something that flies in the air and then can go underwater and emerge, and the velocity suggests that it's not affected by the transfer between substances. Steve says he wants a Lotus sub. Well, buddy, If you can find me a pair that come with decent laces, I'll try them on. That said, as we're looking at this, there was a sighting just a couple of days ago, and this is a great sighting. It's because it's a great example of what can be the case when you're talking about a UFO. All across the country, people reported seeing a lozenge, a tic-tac shaped, unidentified flying object that looked very strange to them. Now, there are a few factors here that make it look strange to the observable eye. It's rare that you see an object in the sky that is so large that it's difficult. No, let me take that back. It's not rare. Often you see an object in the sky and it's so large that it's difficult to really understand the scale of it, right? Like, so for example, most civilians have seen a Chinook, right? That's the big military helicopter with the double blades. It's got two propellers on top of it, and it's a huge helicopter. It's gigantic. I think you can park 3 Abrams in it. That's a 70-ton tank, right? I've been in a Chinook. I've gone flying on a Chinook, and it was cool too because it had a tail gunner. And let me tell you something: the tail gunner on a Chinook is just about their balls are so big that it makes it difficult for this aircraft to take off, because this dude is sitting on the open tailgate of a helicopter holding on to a machine gun, and he's just sitting there, right? He's not sitting in a chair. He's not wearing a seatbelt strapped into a chair. No. He's got a lanyard that's tied back behind him. But really, he's just sitting there. The lanyard is slack so that it gives him enough room to fall if it comes to it, so he doesn't injure himself with the inertia. But he's basically just sitting there on the open tailgate with a machine gun on a post between his legs, and his feet just hanging off the end of the tailgate with the best view of the battle zone. And I talked to a few of those guys. I mean, huge, pendulous testicular fortitude. These boys are rock solid. But imagine for a moment the largest aircraft you have ever been next to and on the outside of, and compare that understanding for scale to the size that an aircraft appears to be when it's flying. So this thing that was observed 2 days ago, there's a lot of video out there. It's a little bit fuzzy, and I'm going to talk about fuzzy video and UFOs because that's actually not a strike against their credibility, and I'll explain why in just a second. But there's several videos floating out there of this giant tic-tac shaped thing up in the sky. That whole scale thing that I just went through, this giant tic-tac thing was moving in a way that an object doesn't seem to move within the scope of our experience. So the problem is that perception of scale over long distances, it turns out the object was a Starlink satellite cluster that hadn't yet opened up to reveal several satellites which deploy after the object is launched. But you're seeing this thing that's huge, but it's so far away. When they were seeing it, it was actually already in space, right? You and I are not accustomed to seeing objects in space which are not heavenly bodies. So the scope of them, the scale of them over that distance, we're not accustomed to seeing objects of that size at that distance, even on the ground, because you know even if you're out in the middle of the desert, you're talking about seeing over the horizon, right? So when you see an object that appears to be in the sky but is really beyond the sky as far as the laws of physics are concerned, and then it appears to be moving in a way that the laws of physics within the atmosphere and within the gravitational pull of the Earth do not move, then that's going to do some funny things to the way you're observing the object, and that's how often that's how a UFO becomes a UFO. It's an unidentified flying object because it's not just that you don't know what it is, it's that you don't understand how it could appear to work the way that it works. However, Cameron, you're awful quiet, brother.
I mean, you're just rolling.
I am. So that's what happens. So that's kind of what happens when you're thinking about the large objects that are further out. But there are objects that occur within atmosphere and are observed by military units as well, where the concern is that you're seeing an object that does things which appear to defy our current understanding of physics. What makes this especially interesting and terrifying is that means that somebody has technology which we don't. Now, if there's an alien that comes to visit and they have technology we don't have yet, that's a threat, that's a problem. But it's kind of like the Godzilla problem, right? Cameron, you and I have talked about the Godzilla attack preparedness problem before. So, right, you know what preppers are. There's this whole group of preppers that I find fascinating, and I've talked to a bunch of them. They're zombie apocalypse preppers. And when I first encountered the zombie apocalypse preppers, I thought, okay, zombie apocalypse, okay, these guys are LARPers. And I don't mean that in the derogatory way that I would refer to modern socialists and anarchists as LARPers. I literally mean live-action role players. I assumed that these zombie apocalypse guys were playing a live-action role-playing game where they pretend to be going through the zombie apocalypse just for the fun of playing the game. I've played LARPs. Cameron and I have both gone and played Nero, and if you happen to be watching and just haven't commented yet, babe, the Society for Creative Anachronism. I know, but it's a LARP. It's a very sophisticated LARP, but it is a LARP. I assume that's what the zombie apocalypse guys were doing. Yes, Steve has also played Nero with us, and we had a blast. You're playing Dungeons & Dragons, right? Nero, it's Dungeons & Dragons. You put on a costume. You have a rubber sword. You have a Nerf sword. You beat the crap out of each other. Now, in our defense, I think it's been 20 years since we've done that, so we were kids. Ish. I remember Cameron's dad coming out with us and wielding a poleaxe in a field battle with like 300 fighters. It was amazing.
Hey, look, I would do it again.
Absolutely. The only thing that's keeping us from doing it now, honestly, is the part of being a grown-up where there are kids to deal with. Because as absolutely adorable as a little fuzzy-footed Eleanor halfling might be, it would also be very difficult to chase around a state park for 47 hours. Anywho, Patrick says, I miss Monster Town. Yes, Patrick also played. Anyway, I assumed that the zombie apocalypse prep guys were were doing that. They weren't. What they do is they train disaster preparedness, and the concept of the zombie apocalypse is a sort of worst case scenario disaster situation, right? The zombie apocalypse with the horde of zombies, it represents the pandemic disaster preparedness. It represents natural disaster. It simultaneously represents all these: pandemic, natural disaster, government and infrastructure collapse, hostile foreign invasion, and local incursion and insurrection, right? It represents every sort of major disaster against which one could prepare occurring simultaneously. And like one of the groups that I talked to, they set up in Florida, or they're headquartered in Florida, and part of what they do is they do all their be ready for everything preparedness, but they focus on hurricane type stuff, and they give classes. The CDC has a zombie apocalypse preparedness resource center exactly that reason, because it's the everything disaster. Right? And so you can make preparations for that. Now, being prepared for everything gets expensive and complicated. And so like I alluded to a minute ago, and I'm going to ask Cameron just because I want to bring him in because I've been kind of running away with it. What's the problem, Cameron, with the Godzilla preparedness program?
Well, the problem with the Godzilla preparedness program is how likely is it that Godzilla is actually going to attack? I mean, it's great to be prepared because you never know. A kaiju might show up one day, but the odds of that are real low, like super low. And now you're completely Godzilla proof. But then an earthquake happens and you're still absolutely screwed because you were prepared for Godzilla and not an earthquake.
And I was hoping you touch on the expense problem a little bit too, because so like global warming, for example, the whole climate change thing, and this is actually the problem with the whole climate, with the whole cult of climatology, whole cult of climate change. To be prepared for the Godzilla attack, you have to build a weapon that can destroy a threat or defend against a threat when that threat is a near infinitely unknowable level of threat, which is also highly unlikely to occur, which means that it will cost an absolute huge amount of money to prepare against it, and then it may never happen. You know, in business terms, for example, you think about, okay, I need to buy insurance for my business. I do cinematography. I have a bunch of cameras. So, okay, having my cameras insured against the threat of weather and the cameras getting rained on or breaking or even being stolen. Yeah. But am I going to go and pay an extraordinarily high premium against the threat of organized camera piracy? Like, I mean literally that I'm going to go out on a boat and another boat that's covered in pirates who only go to rob cinematographers on boats with cameras. Right? They have like a giant Arri Alexa with cross tripods under it on their flag. Am I going to buy an insurance policy against that eventuality? Especially if it's an extremely expensive. Hell no. I mean, that threat, while maybe never zero, or you know, that threat, while yeah, it may never be zero, but it's close enough.
Well, and here's the thing with aliens. If there are aliens and they possess technology sufficient to allow them to travel interstellar, that's basically like the difference between a bird and a worm, and we're the worm in that scenario. Star Trek kind of solves this problem by having their primary fuel source be a reaction between matter and antimatter.
Right.
And even then, they kind of have to cut some corners. They've invented the concept of warp speed, which is faster than light travel. But in order to move anywhere close to the speed of light, the amount of energy that you have to expend, and even then, like let's say we could travel at the speed of light. The closest star to us is 4 light years away, which means at the speed of light, it would take us 4 years to get there. So if there's a civilization that has figured out how to traverse that kind of distance, because space is big, y'all. I mean, you want to talk about scale. Space is big. So, yes, we could have an absolute UFO preparedness plan, and we could spend a whole lot of money for it. And then when the aliens show up, like they whoop our ass anyway, because we wouldn't even be able to comprehend what it took for them to traverse the distance.
Right. And yeah, I mean, space is big. As far as we know, the known universe is not contained inside of a bubble of any sort. It is infinitely large. That word infinite does not do itself justice. A space which is infinitely large contains an infinite number of things of infinite size. Which means that those individual things of infinite size are so large that they individually contain an infinite number of things of infinite size. Now, that's a turtles all the way down understanding of infinity, and it is still not inaccurate or incorrect. You start chewing on those numbers, the star that's 4 light years away. Even if we were able to break light speed and get up to, say, 4 times the speed of light, right? Which is so fast that it travels from point A to point B within your available physically possible visual field instantaneously. At 4 times that speed, it's still a year of Netflix to get to the next star. It's huge. And if I'm not mistaken, warp 1 in Star Trek terms, warp 1 is significantly faster than light speed.
No, I'm not going to go too far into it, but warp 1 is light speed.
Okay. But warp 2 is more than double light speed.
That is correct.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Right.
You sound like you have a better grasp of that than I do.
Yeah, I do. It's,
Hey, brother, well, I'm more than happy to do a whole show just you telling us what you know about Star Trek.
Oh, Lord, I don't think I could stuff that into one show. I don't even know that I could restrict it to one character.
So, let me get back to the UFO sightings, because this one's recent. Okay, this one says March 25th, right, this year. UFOs or drones? What is swarming U.S. Navy warships? So there is a thing, and I want to look into this more and more. I almost had a deal about 2 years ago with somebody that a friend of mine introduced me to, who's working on drone swarm technology. And it's literally they launch like 1,000 small drones, and the 1,000 small drones each have some kind of telemetry equipment on them. Some of them are cameras, some of them are infrared sensors, some of them are microphones doing sound stuff, and the drone swarm, it's made up of a bunch of tiny drones, and it's all controlled by one controller. So it's a bunch of bees, and you send it to surround an object or to examine an area and collect data and report it back. So, UFOs or drones? What is swarming U.S. Navy warships? The drones purportedly appeared at a time when few civilian ships were nearby, so it's unclear exactly where they came from. It's also unclear who would have access to drones that could stay in the air for as long as 90 minutes. That's huge. Right? That should be the 6th observable. I've got some drones. And I've shopped drones a lot before picking out the drones that I have. My primary drone is a DJI Phantom Pro 4K drone. It's 5 years old-ish. And let me tell you something. Drone battery technology has not come a long way since then. My my DJI Phantom is good for about 25 to 30 minutes. 30 tops. Absolute tops. And that's perfect wind conditions with no resistance and basically just hovering, no maneuvering. Right? And without running if I don't run the camera and I don't move and there's zero wind, I might hit 30 minutes, probably more like 29. Usually I get between 22 and 25 out of it under normal conditions. Because the more wind, the more the drone has to work to counterbalance the wind, because a lot of that is automated. It's a pretty sophisticated system. 90 minutes. They're talking about a drone swarm that stayed in flight for 90 minutes. That alone is technology beyond what's available to our government currently. And I'm not saying that as someone who has not had experience on the spookier side of this. My first experience flying drones, okay. I flew drones in Afghanistan. I won't go into much more detail than that. But I can tell a funny war story if anybody's interested in that in just a minute. Just the fact that they were up for 90 minutes is almost suspicious, right? The Navy, Coast Guard, and FBI have pursued a high-level investigation into a series of incidents that took place around California's Channel Islands in the summer of 2019, when, as according to a story published by The War Zone, groups of unidentified aircraft pursued that service's vessels. Excuse me. In this case, it looks like there were as many as 6 aircraft swarming the ships over the course of 2 nights, even in low visibility. First reported last year when filmmaker Dave Beatty, who is also a UFO researcher, took notice of incidents involving the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Kidd. So, the thing about these drones, let's assume that aliens aren't an option. That means Russians or Chinese or somebody like that have something that we don't. So we're not just talking about something that's fascinating and entertaining. We're talking about something that's important. We're talking about national security threats. At a time when we are in open conflict with China. Okay, we're not in a shooting war yet, but if you don't think that we're on the cusp of that, then you're not paying attention. And amid that, we have Joe Biden as the facade of the presidency. Suddenly this topic just got a lot less fun. But let's start to do the wrap up, because we're at 35 minutes. I know, Cameron, you've probably got to get on down the road. I think this is something that we should spend more time talking about in the future, in the near future. And I want to hear from you guys in the chat real quick. A couple of years ago, I started talking to the local chapter of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Organization. There are several other groups like that. Now, if I were to get involved with one of these groups, like MUFON, for example, people send reports to MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. And if you're a volunteer for MUFON, they will send you out and you go and visit the people, you know, that have sent in their UFO reports, and do interviews and collect whatever evidence they may have, and file a report about the UFO sighting. And at first blush, that sounds like you're going to get dealing with a lot of crazies, and there may be a good bit of that, but it's also the case that, just like I was telling you the story a minute ago about the Starlink situation, where a bunch of people reported UFOs, and it turns out that that UFO was actually the Starlink satellite being launched by Elon Musk's group. Well,
it was Daddy Musk being Daddy Musk.
Right, it was Daddy Musk being Daddy Musk, because as Elon Musk said to Mark Zuckerberg, "When I'm conquering space, it's actual space, man." But it was MUFON. It was the Mutual UFO Network who received reports of a UFO, did the research, checked the sky charts and the launch schedules, and coordinated all that information and pulled it together and figured out, oh, I see. And it was them that figured out that it was the Starlink that people were seeing, and then put out reports to the planet, to the world, to say, hey, guys, it's cool. That wasn't the invasion yet. That was just Elon, right? He got faded on Rogan. It doesn't slow motion his flow. And so he had to conquer a little bit more of my space. So I very well, especially if it's going to be the kind of content that you guys are interested in watching, I might just try to link up with one of those groups soon and see if I can't start grabbing up some of those reports and going and doing the interviews. And who knows, they might just send me to talk to crazy people who are deeply entertaining.
Well, you know what's really fascinating about that organization is, it's basically, it's crowdsourcing for nerds. And as Scott Adams said, once the nerds start looking at your shit, they will find your shit. And and nobody joins MUFON unless they've already got a vested interest. Like, there's part of me that would just love for there to be confirmation that, no, aliens are real and they're terrifying. Just in the fact that they even exist and have figured out a way to visit this planet. But you get hundreds of people together, and everybody's going to have, or possibly even thousands, and everybody's going to have a vested interest in making sure that the information is accurate, that it's all cataloged correctly, so that if the singularity event ever actually happens, it's completely credible.
Now, there's something that we need to talk about. Obviously not today. But the singularity, there's a few different... That word is being used differently now than it was a few years ago, and the new usage almost feels like an intentional misdirect from the original usage, which had more to do with the rate of differentially rapid acceleration of increase of communications technology approaching a rate of increase rate so high that it cannot expand more until we integrate biomechanically. That's what they were talking about originally. And by the way, I applaud you if you were able to keep up with that string of with that sentence and that string of words. But that was not my trademark circumlocution. That was actually a very succinct description of the concept. But the new idea of the singularity appears to be more like what a year or three ago we were referring to as the Internet of Things or the Internet of Everything. The integrated Internet of Everything is not the same as the singularity. And to conflate those two is a mistake of category and degree. That's an important mistake to avoid. So we need to do another one of these where we talk about that specifically and in great detail. Well, that's I think that's the show. Do you have anything else for us this morning, Cameron? Hey, Dan Burks is with us. Good morning, Dan. I'm sorry, brother. We're actually just about to sign off.
Okay, so what do you think is likely going to be the conclusion of the report? Because there's two things to think about.
I don't think there's going to be a conclusion in the report. I think it's going to basically be a list of observed phenomenon which have not been reported before, and they won't bother to draw any conclusions. It'll just be like, on this date, this person saw this thing, and we never figured out what it was.
Well, okay then.
Yeah, I think it's basically just going to be a list of UFO sightings that haven't been reported before. And it may go so far as to include legal justifications for the original classification of the sighting and the reporting, but I think that's going to be it. Steve says it's important that that we avoid also the Vogon poetry.
See, there's another nerdy reference for you.
Oh yeah, I will rend you with my burgle crunching. See if I don't. I'm actually a big fan of Vogon poetry.
Though, to be fair,
but I prefer it in the original Klingon.
Yeah, so to be fair, though, I think the destruction of the Earth would be a whole lot worse than hearing a big fat frog-looking alien tell bad poetry.
In theory, yes. I don't know. There is the argument that fast is better. So, would you like to be beheaded now or hanged slowly for the next several days? Well, let me think about my prospects of escaping the hanging. All right, so thanks for tuning in today, guys. Let me know. Actually, leave a comment, not just the chats here. Drop down in the comments section of the video and leave a comment. What'd you think of today's show? This topic in particular, and does anybody have an opinion on which UFO organization I should look into joining? Take a peek at that, tell me what you think, and we will see you tomorrow.